Mayor, you good?
Yes.
All right. All right, good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, January 8th, 2024. I've got 7 o'clock. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole to order for our first committee meeting of the year. We will get started with facilities update, 825 Tech Center Drive. I'll turn things over to you, Director Schultz. Good evening, sir.
Sorry, bear with me one moment. So good evening, folks. Sorry for the little bit of a delay there. So we're here tonight to give you an update on our 825 project. Obviously, it's been a little bit since we've been here. I think it was the end of August, early September, the last time that we presented before you. Right now, going through the front here, I'll do some quick introductions, but this is our design team. Maria Rosemary, Keith Hall, Katie Freeland, Santiago, and his last name, he's only been with us for a couple of weeks, is Albaraz. They are all with MSA. They're our architects. Brant Quinn, our construction manager, he is on his way. He has been delayed slightly, but he will join us. So when we were here in August, we basically presented to you folks the 60% drawings, or the design development drawings of the design. What happens at that particular point in time is these fine folks go away into the background and they begin to do a whole lot of work developing the construction documents that ultimately rise to the level of 100% construction document that ultimately gets bid for the construction of said project. So what we're here to do tonight is to give you an update on the full design of the building. That doesn't just include the building, obviously, but that also includes the site itself. And some of the things that you're not going to see a very major difference. If you guys have been following along closely, whether you're residents watching online or council members for that matter, the building largely looks the same as it did for a while now. But what we've been doing in the background, right, we've been, I guess what I would refer to as nipping and tucking and making sure that, the building is right-sized, the program is right-sized, and that we're being responsible and meeting the goals and objectives of the project. So this presentation goes as follows. Mr. Hall, I believe, is going to give the majority of the presentation update on the design itself. From there, we're going to go into next steps. When we talk about next steps, what you guys are going to see 825 presented before you folks at many committee meetings rolling forward. We will be here again on January 22nd doing budget and bond legislation. We will get into budget and bond legislation at that particular meeting. So this meeting is largely to reset you folks on the design of the project. At the conclusion of the presentation, at the conclusion of the question and answer period, we'll also be asking for permission to bid the project at that particular point in time. So with that, I will turn this over to Mr. Hall to continue. Yeah, you can just use the laptop. It's going to be a little bit of a, you can use your page up and page down. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here again tonight. This is an exciting time because, as Kevin mentioned, the design is pretty much to a point where it's finished, and we've been putting a lot of the technical documents together for the project and getting ready to go out for bid. And what that means is we're going to be starting construction very soon. So that's an exciting time. So tonight, you've seen the building. I'm not going to really, a lot of the images you're going to see is a repeat, just sort of putting them back in front of you, and then I'm going to do a little bit more on the storytelling as to how we got here with this design, so you have a little bit more background information as we move forward. So what you see on the screen now is just the agenda. I'm not going to really run through everything, but what I just talked about is generally the agenda tonight. The project objectives, these project design objectives are very important to us. We established these very early on with city staff, and pretty much in the first design meeting we ever had. They have informed this project from day one. So I am going to walk through each one of these things and kind of give a little bit of background on them. One of the things we wanted was for the building to be invitable and approachable. That's important for any government or civic building. Want to be transparent, want to be welcoming. We want this to be representative of the community, and we want the community to feel like they can come here anytime, any day, and engage with their representatives. Obviously, create a clear and civic presence. The building, you don't want it to necessarily, if you go to the site now, it's all the buildings up there tend to look the same. So, could we go and just put a City of Gahanna sign on a building? Maybe, and just have it blend in, but it needs to look like it's been there a while. It needs to look like it's supposed to be there. Not too much unlike any other, if you go to Washington, D.C. or something like that. It has to be community and service focused. Again, it gets back to that welcoming, transparent, and opening environment. Efficient in planning. That's important for to make sure we right-size the building, not for today, but also into the future, so that we're not overbuilding, but we're not necessarily underbuilding, but we're doing the responsible thing. Allow for future expansion. Those two are kind of tied together. And probably one of the more important ones is safe and secure, realizing what the current situation is here. Security is something that, frankly, is at a breach in this existing facility. And we've had a lot of discussions about it with the new building, and I think we have really addressed that issue with this new design. Meets addition and renovation square foot goals. That gets back to right sizing it. Build the right amount of square footage for the operation that's going on into it. Meets program goals. That's kind of tied to the square footage, but also program goals being, we were challenged with putting seniors into the building, putting administrative space into the building, and putting police space into the building, and making sure they all had their own presence, their own areas, as well as met all the other goals that we have on the list. The building rebranding, unique identity, that reflects back to some of the other things I was saying. The building as it exists today sort of blends around with its existing surroundings. So what can we do to give this building some new identity and give it some presence in its current location? And then daylighting quality of interior spaces. I'd like to expand on this. There's this kind of expanded just into more sustainability and green design. What green design, what sustainable features can we incorporate into the building that make the most sense? Daylighting is obviously one of them. So taking advantage of natural light and lighting the interior spaces. That always makes them more inviting and a place that you want to be and more workable. It's not good to work inside a room that has four walls with no windows and not know really what's going on outside, right? So, the program analysis. When we came on board for the project, you all had already gone through a programming exercise to maybe get an understanding for what your current needs were for the operations you plan to put into this building. So what you knew about the building at that time was that you had identified about 62,000 square feet of a need for administration in City Hall, 65,000 or so for police, and then for the senior center, about 8,500, which equated to a total square footage of about 135,000 square feet. And then you had this existing building. And the existing building was 3 stories with about 30,000 square feet each. And so we knew that we were looking at an addition that probably was going to be around 35,000 to 40,000 square feet, give or take. Some of that additional square footage at that time was really directed towards police, thinking that the existing building was more administration space, and police have unique needs, certainly within the firing range, certainly within the detention, certainly within the Sally Port and all those things. But I will tell you, as we got into the design and trying to sort of, manage the square footage a little bit better, that assumption really didn't play its way out fully. And I'll go into that a little bit. But here's the existing site, just to get everybody oriented. I think everybody's familiar with Tech Center Drive. It is the second building in on the right. Pretty much looks identical to the first building on the right. It's hard to, there's not a distinctive difference between the two. And even when you look at this aerial, you start to see the little notions in planning that they did to the corners of the buildings, or even how the buildings were shaped within the entire development that that everybody bought into early on into the project. So we saw some opportunity here that, given that you're second building in, what can we do to, sort of bring this building up and give it more civic presence than what it would currently have today? And then just to remind you, the existing building, it was a circa 1990s, late 1990s building. Floor to floors are 14 feet. That's pretty important to remember as I go through the conversation. It was predominantly occupied by AEP for a while, and then became a lot of tenant improvement type space where tenants sign a 5-year lease and do a build out, and they kind of go in and out. So it's been used pretty well over the past 15, 20 years that it's been in existence. And then the design itself. So some things to kind of note. Obviously our site is here. There is a little bit of a detention area here, and these two sides of the site, which is the eastern and southernmost portions, are heavily wooded, with the other two sides, the north and the western side, pretty much open to the rest of the development. There are bike paths that come down along this roadway. One of the unique things about the site, I'll say unique in jest, was that it originally came down, the bike path did, crossed the road, went down on this side, and then crossed back and came over. So one of the things the design team saw early on was, can we fix that? And what can we do to correct that? And the reason it was that way is because the bus stop was over here. That was the only thing that we can figure that was driving it. So we did rework where I think this is an existing curb cut here. This is a new curb cut. The existing parking had you could pretty much drive and gain a lot of speed and drive right into the building. So from a security perspective, we saw right away that we needed to correct that. So that drove a lot of the renovation work that we did in the front of the building. And then we saw that as an opportunity. So we also, with the building square footages that we were adding to our detention requirements. So getting back to the green sustainability elements that we were talking about earlier, we saw an opportunity. We had a little bit of green space up here. We can work in some what we call bioswales. And what bioswales are is they are essentially filtering systems for the water. When it goes in, it filters all the bad stuff out of the debris before it goes to the detention area and then goes off site. So we've got a couple of those worked in up here. We also were able to work in some EV charging stations in the front for the public. And then in all this, we were able to rework, instead of having this direct route into the front doors, cars will come in and there's all these barriers that tends to keep it's very passive and keeps the traffic speed down and doesn't allow for them to really impede onto the building. And then I'll show you some images of some landscaping up here that also puts an additional layer of passive security in. One of the other requirements we had was to provide secured parking primarily for the police, but also for the administrative staff. Right now, they're all out here in the open. I'm sure many of you come through here on a school day at 3 o'clock, and that is just a lot of kids just cutting through that lot. And there is quite a bit of exposure there. So police parking primarily is going to occur on the western side of the building. Within this swale here is sort of the cutoff, but it's defined like right in this area. Then all the administrative staff, as well as police personal vehicles, POVs, will park back in this area. Incorporated into each one of these areas is some covered parking, like carport, that we are looking, and that would be for primarily for city-owned vehicles, so for police cars and vehicles, and then over here for administrative type owned vehicles, not for their POVs, but we are looking to incorporate solar power in onto the solar panels in onto the top of those and collecting that energy and then using it within the building itself. So a lot of things going on here. You know, the site, and some other things we've talked about is with the bike path is incorporating a trailhead into the parking lot. So a lot of cyclists will go to trailheads, you know, drop their bike and take off. It's always nice to have restroom features and all that stuff available there. And those, you know, this, you know, obviously is would support a function like that. So another thing I want to point out here when I get to the next slides is the primary entrance to the building is right here, where that big dot is. That is the main entrance into the main lobby that most people are generally going to go, and that's where we want them to go. There are two secondary entrances, one up here, that's primarily for the senior center, and then another one over here for police. That doesn't mean you can't walk in this entrance and get over to those areas. It just means that this is the primary and those are secondary entrances. They do have their individual entrances. And then in the back, to accommodate seniors, we've worked in a back entrance to the senior center to allow them to utilize some parking here that's outside the secure zone. And then obviously all the administrative staff will be able to enter the building through back doors along the back edges of the building. And we just threw this in to remind everybody of the front of the building. So as I go to the next slide, you can really see, and that's pretty much the same view, the improvements. And we didn't just do this arbitrarily. If you heard me in the beginning, one of our challenges was with the square footage, we had a requirement for a lot of story and a half type space in the building. The floor to floors in the building are 14 feet high. So to put a space like this in a 14-foot high space, a large assembly space, it's not really conducive. So we saw very early on that we were going to be challenged with, on the first floor, on grade level, trying to get the right amount of square footage, the right type of square footage, right at grade level. So that right away drove a lot of the renovation work along these facades, because we took all of our story and a half space and ran it basically along the front of the building. In addition to that, as you can see, this bookend over here, as I like to call it, and this bookend over here, being all stone, this is the multi-use room that's associated with the senior center, and this is the police. And then we looked at connecting them with a pretty much very transparent, very glass structure, what you'll hear us refer to as curtain wall. So that embraces the daylighting, allowing it to flow into the building and bring daylighting into spaces such as this, such as the lobby, such as the multi-use room and those sort of spaces. So we really keyed in on utilizing that daylighting in the right places where where it made the most sense. This is just another view. This is the senior multi-use room over here. This would be the senior entrance, so downplayed. You'll see this heightened piece right here with stone on the outside of it with glass in the middle. That's the main entrance of the building. That's where most people are going to be drawn to. And we do this, architecturally, we do this for a reason. So it's an intuitive thing. Oh, there's a tall point with a lot of glass. Most people are typically drawn to those points of entry. So that allows for that to occur. Then you see, getting back to all the transparency that we have in the building, that idea of openness and it has a civic presence. And then some of the landscape images. One of the things that, if you heard me mention, I talked about passive security. There's a lot of that built in here. So we also have circulation spines built into the building on the inside. Those are repeated on the outside with these trellises. And within those trellis areas, we've incorporated little living rooms, and there's a lot of difference in elevations, a lot of A lot of different types of vegetation going on in there and so forth. So it's going to be it's going to have a park feeling to it, is what I like to say. So we've been able to bring sort of that park space into the front of the building as you sort of flow into the building from there. It's very transition. This is the first floor. I'll come back to this plan over here, but this is the main entrance I was talking about. So that's the heightened area of the building that I outlined. So you come in this main entrance, there is a lobby right here, and then right off the lobby is this room, council chambers. So very well connected, and then right up front. And that's important to pause on, because right now we're sitting in a space that's well into the building. That's a security issue. So allowing people to get into this far in the building is something that we don't want to happen. So that's why we've located it here up front. Also over here is where there's windows, transaction windows there for people to come in and pay their utility bills. And as I said, this red zone here is pretty much public space. So you can come in the building here and go up this corridor, get to the senior area, which is all this purple. That's the multi-use room, multi-purpose room. It's a large room which can handle a lot of different activities. And then the senior area is here. They have a lounge and a little bit of a programming space. All the sort of orange space is administrative type city hall space. And then this space down here is primarily, the city hall space is primarily those spaces that engage with the public mostly. So paying your utility bill or coming in and submitting for a building permit. Those types of uses are located down here on the first floors, because we don't want to bring people up into the building either. So keeping the public primarily down on the first floor doesn't mean that they'll never come up in the building. It just means if they come up in the building, they'll be escorted through one of the staff members at that point. And then everything in blue here, this is all police. So the Sally Port, the detention area, their roll call, their main entry area up here, evidence storage. There is a gym back here that is actually going to be shared between city staff as well as police staff. That's why it's set up back here in the corner, so that city staff doesn't have to get real deep into the police side of things too. So, really paying attention. The police has to be, they have to be, for the most part, separated from admin just because of the nature of what they do. But there is some crossover, and where we have allowed for that crossover is primarily here in the gym space. And then this is a basement. That basement is pretty much situated. You can kind of look at the footprint of it. You see this angled piece here, see that angled piece here. So if you took this up and just lift it, it sits underneath here. That's where the firing range is. I believe it's 10 lanes. And then a virtual firing range up here in the corner. Then as you get to the second floor, again, same thing. All the blue is police. On this floor is primarily occupied by their locker rooms, as well as some investigative and admin areas over there. And then this is all city administration. One of the things I wanted to point out tonight is right here is the council offices. So prior to coming to a meeting or even outside of that, that's your all's place to go and land. So you will be on the second floor, because obviously you'll have the credentials to get up there and so forth. And then the third floor, you can see where we put, mostly it's occupied by city administration. I think there's IT, some HR, the mayor's office is up here, as well as probably what I would call the executive level, if you want to say that, of the police. So that's where the chief and lieutenants and all that would habitate. Whoop. Sorry. So our original program was 135,000 square feet. You heard me talk about right sizing and efficient programming and everything. We were able, through the process, to drill down and get this down closer to the mid 120s. And that feels real good. We do have some expansion space. I think we have about 5,000 square feet of space that is tagged as storage right now, but could potentially become expansion space down the road if need be. This is just an interior of the lobby. So when you walk in the vestibule, this is what your first impression is going to be. Over here is council chambers. And as you can see, there's a site, this is a double high space. So there will be views up to a open walkway that overlooks from the second floor down onto the lobby. We are recommending a video board in essence back here so that it's an easy way to bring graphics in and advertise community events and community images and that sort of thing in there. And then also, if you had a night where this was packed, you could also use this as overflow area and project to that to that screen out in the lobby also. And then this is looking down, as I mentioned, from the second level. You can see what's nice about this is you can start to see some of the features that we've incorporated. This is the face of the existing building, so we're not just ripping off what's there. We are going to, in this case, you can see we're taking out the windows that are there, but we're going to leave the brick. So you'll see some remnants of the existing building, and we are really trying to sort of merge this, from a design perspective, this nice clean space, maybe with some industrial space. So leaving some brick exposed and showing some cross bracing and having some exposed construction into it. So a really nice approach, we think. And then I want to point out, you can also see how all the natural light is flowing into these common spaces also. Council chambers, very excited about this because it's going to be a very different space than what you're currently in today. But a tiered ceiling, it goes up. There is a clear story that runs along the edge up here. And then the natural light is just layered in. So on the outside of this is a corridor. On the outside of that is the outside of the building. So the natural light will filter into this space as you see it. And then up here is the dais. So as I mentioned, through some of this, is that the existing building there was so much added value in the existing building. That was the right thing to do, but it also presented many challenges. The 14-foot floor to floor, as I mentioned early on, that we made the assumption 40,000 square feet of added space, and we were just going to go in and renovate the existing building. That didn't play itself out because the type of space that the existing building had to offer was not the type of space that we necessarily needed when it came to the story and a half, for example, on council chambers, on the multi-use space and those types of things. We also had essential facility requirements. What that means is from a building code perspective, this building has to be designed at a higher level from a structural perspective. So the existing building was designed for tenant build out without even taking into account that a tornado or some other high winds or anything like that. If the building's unoperational for a business or something, that's a little different than a government center that serves the community. You have to serve the community almost immediately after those disasters come online. So structurally there, I think it's called a tier 4 or something like that, where you have to go in, and we had to reinforce a couple of the joints in the roof structure. The walls were pretty good, but it did require us to go in and do some additional things. The site and the building security, that, we could have gone in with this building and said, we're just going to recap the existing parking lot. But as I mentioned, the car could really gain a lot of speed and get into and drive right into where we currently have council chambers in that design. So we had to sort of look at that. Plus, the police right now in the situation they're in, that's not good either, just to have their cruisers out there parked out in the open where the public can walk by them and everything. So we wanted to correct that. Sustainability features, frankly, there were none built into it when we started. So there was a lot of opportunity there. And then obviously with all of that, that led us to an opportunity to do something with the building's identity. So the 14-foot floor to floor, it really restricted us, as I've been saying, in terms of putting a council chambers in, putting a sally port in, putting a firing range in, and those types of spaces, because they need to have a high bay type space. So we really, as I said, we focused that onto the front of the building and even onto the sides of the building. The lower ceilings are not conductive for, specifically to police training either, in a lot of their training areas. The essential facility requirements, again, one of the things I didn't mention earlier was the storm shelter. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but that is also a building code requirement that is only on essential facilities. So what that means is we have to design a compartment essentially into the building that the occupants of the building that can go into during an event and be safe enough that if the existing building is completely wiped out, that they can come out and resume city operations as quickly as they possibly can. So that right now is incorporated into the basement where we currently have the firing range. And that is that is a challenging design element to incorporate into the building. The building, with us doing the renovations that we are, essential facility improvements, as well as the storm shelter, ultimately that's going to extend the life expectancy of the building. We are definitely looking at a 50-year plus building here. So the investment up front in these things will have added value to it. And then the lower long-term maintenance. As I mentioned, the building today it's built for tenant improvement. It's built, sort of on the cheap from an interiors perspective. When we do public facilities, especially with police, we know they have to be durable spaces because they really do beat them up just because of what they do. I've talked a lot tonight about site and building security. In terms of the layout of the building, one of the things too is the separation of access between the administration and the police. One of the things to think about there is that this is a multi-story police department, and police cannot share a building core, elevators and stairs, with administration, city staff. They can't bring detainees or folks they're going to interview primarily up in the building with city staff sitting in an elevator right next to them. So that alone requires us to have two separate cores in the building. So we had to add a core for police to go into the building itself. And that's the separation. And we have to separate everything horizontally and vertically from a secure perspective. So a lot of doors with access control on them between the two. Sustainability features. I think this is one area where we really have advanced the building in a lot of ways. The EV charging that's up front is front and center where the public can find it. I think it's going to be used. We've got solar power, the stormwater detention improvements. What we learned when we got into the design of the building was that the existing stormwater detention system was very much compromised, a little bit under design, and we were able to fix that and then incorporate bioswales into it. The existing HVAC systems, when we got on site early on, and I think you all knew this going into it, that the existing rooftop units were at the end of their lifespan. Well, there's a big difference between a unit that was built in the late 1990s, which was out there, and one that is built today in terms of efficiency. A huge difference. So you're getting the most efficient, effective HVAC systems you can buy in today's environment. All the finishes today, for the most part, are coming from recycled materials. That area of construction materials has really taken advantage of recycling. And even construction materials in general has come a long way since 1990 from a recycling perspective. The bathroom fixtures, we're going to incorporate low flow advantages into them. And then the building right now is equipped throughout with fluorescent lighting. Good thing back in the day, but now we have LED, which is even better. So the entire building and room controls will all be advanced, will be LED. You'll have the automatic sensors that turn lights on and off when you come in and out of the building. So it's going to be, we have really honed in on the most responsible green initiatives that make sense for this facility, especially for the long haul. And then, as a result of all this, we've been able to create a unique design. That's, if you remember the first two slides I showed up there, this building is really going to sit on its own up there, and people are going to know it's Gahanna's Civic Center, it's Gahanna's City Hall. And we've been able to, I think, one of the things is safe and secure while inviting, open, and transparent. That has been continuously discussed throughout the process amongst all of us. And I think that's incredibly, we've addressed that incredibly well. And then I think also with the planning and everything we've done, I think they're going to operate more efficiently and more effectively. They're not going to be sitting on top of each other. And I think the public is going to appreciate that, because I think we got a building that is just better when the public comes in and engaging. They're going to have clear, distinctive places to go and understand the flow in the building itself. And then I also think for recruiting and retaining the best employees in your community, whether it's on the admin side or even on the police side, you're going to have a huge advantage with this facility. So as I've been mentioning, I'm one to think that challenges create opportunity, and I believe this whole group, the design team, staff, have really looked at all the challenges as, well, what can we do to make this better? What can we do to benefit us for the long haul? In every single area and every single decision, we have done that. As I noted, it's allowed for additional green initiatives, sustainable initiatives. We had a need for high base space, but that was also allowed for a unique building design. The essential building requirements really prepared us, set us up to create a 50-year solution for the building. And then, as I just pointed out, the new building plan will allow your city to more effectively serve your community. And I think that that's pretty important also. This is you.
Thank you, sir. So next steps, right? So obviously we're here tonight giving you guys an update on the overall design. We will be, like I said at the beginning here, asking for permission to bid the project. Permission to bid the project doesn't obligate us to, it basically obligates us to go out to different contractors, obviously a whole myriad of contractors, in order to get construction costs, not budgets anymore, but construction costs on the project. What you're going to hear at the January 22nd meeting, so two weeks from tonight, is the project budget and permission to bond up to a certain amount. What you're going to end up hearing in that particular meeting, it's going to get a little bit, I don't want to say mundane, but there's a lot of different terms and terminology as we will discuss. We will discuss the project budget as a total project cost. We're not going to discuss just simply construction costs, right? We're going to review even the purchase of the building and what gets us to our bottom line and the amount of money that the city would be looking to invest into the property in order to build the project that Keith just described. We'll talk about contingencies, allowances, bid alternates, right? So things that, depending on the exact numbers as they come in, maybe we don't do a particular portion of the project because we bid it as an alternate. One of the examples there I'll give you is the asphalt on the backside parking lot in good enough condition today to not do that portion of the project today, but to do it at some point in the future. Those are all types of decisions that we'll discuss as we get further and further down in the process here. And then obviously the myriad of soft costs, right? It takes money in order to hire the talented people in order to design the building and do those types of things. We have to obviously have builder's risk insurance. So all of those costs add up, and what do those look like, and how do they impact the project overall? In the middle of, well, I guess that actually says the end of February, we'll be going to Planning Commission for final development plan approval and any variances that are required. We'll have the opportunity at Committee of the Wholes here to continue to discuss the project in February and March. And then ultimately, on that March 25th meeting, we will introduce construction contract number 1. I will also refer to that, and we'll probably mince words 100 times, but GMP, you will hear that, guaranteed maximum price for the first portion of the project on March 25th, with legislative approval there around on April 1st, if everything goes as planned, with a notice to proceed to Alfred. Mr. Quinn is in the room, joined us, with notice to proceed for them happening on or around April 15th, with groundbreaking and demolition beginning on the existing structure, portions of the existing structure, excavation as another example of the basement area, on or around the end of April, April 30th, May 1st. You guys will see a second construction contract come before you guys in mid-May, and that is for the remainder of the project, right? So we're going to do, it's basically broken out, and it's just rough math at this point, 1/3 on construction contract number 1, and then 2/3 of the remainder of the project on construction contract number 2. With a notice to proceed for the remainder of the work on or around May 21st, with about an 18 to 24 month construction schedule. I think actually, I don't know that they did this as a joke or not, but I think the largest schedule that I have, I actually think it shows the building being turned over on December 25th, Christmas Day, 2025. So nobody wants to move in the winter, as everybody's been telling me. So that's the high-level overall schedule here. So you're going to see a lot of us talking about 825, this project team here talking about 825 here in the next coming weeks and months. And we look forward to getting into the budget next committee of the whole meeting there on the 22nd. So with that, we're prepared to answer any questions, and then I can take the formal action of permission of it.
Thank you, Director Schultz. And first, before opening things up for discussion, just want to thank everybody for being here and for the very thorough presentation and for all of your work to date on the project. It's greatly appreciated and very exciting to hear and see all the progress so far. So with that, any discussion from my colleagues? Yes, Mr. Renner.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for what really is an exciting summary of our new building. And I imagine walking through the floors as you described them. So I have 2 major high-level questions, and I don't know where it is in the process to where you guys are thinking on this. Number 1 is having to deal with sustainability. What building performance indicators are you actually hoping to achieve? And then with that, can you talk about when you're doing the demolition, what types of things are, what are you going to do with materials there that you can recycle? And is there anything going to be recycled into the new building? And then what avenues to do with the materials afterwards? Because what I don't want to hear is a lot of this is going to the landfill. I want to understand what's happening to the materials that we are taking down. But first off, with any kind of building, you should already have performance indicators in mind. And so I'd first like to understand, what are those targets?
Looks on.
It says it's on.
Yeah, it is. It's on, Katie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just not talking close
You
enough
just
to
have
it.
get close.
There you go.
It's on.
All right, so in terms of the performance strategy of the building, one, I will say, and it wasn't listed directly on the list, but just purchasing an existing building and utilizing that as the basis for your work is a highly sustainable thing, right? So if we were to start this new, if we were demoing a building of that size, there's all kinds of obviously negative sustainable impact of that. So just by the sheer nature of starting with the structure that we have, that's already a huge sustainable move. I will say from our standpoint, the current building construction industry standards is already highly sustainable. We are not necessarily achieving like a LEED status with this building, if that's where your question was going, but we are using a lot of LEED strategies to get to the building design. So a lot of our technical specs, the things we're putting into the building, the things we're asking their group to put into the building, there are certain performance criteria associated with them, which would achieve those LEED standards, even though we are not necessarily asking for that LEED certification. And then I'm going to let Brant answer the question about the.
In regards to the construction waste, so we typically, there's not a major portion of the building that's being demolished. It's really just sort of that circular section at the front entry that's coming down. Most of that is steel and concrete. There's some brick that makes up for that. We will be taking all the materials to a construction and demolition facility, likely down in Lancaster. It's one of our diverse contractor friends that we use, and they will sort those materials out. The steel will become recycled. A lot of times the concrete, in addition, becomes recycled. They'll crush it. It can be reused into new concrete, or it can be reused into roadway base. And then, same thing with the drywall and a lot of the insulation products. Those will be recycled at that facility. We'll get reports. Each dumpster will be weighed as it comes in. They'll give us a report of how much steel was in that dumpster, how much concrete was in that dumpster, how much drywall, and what was the diversion rate of those materials. A lot of things that we do on site, if we do decide to tear up the asphalt lot back there, what we do is we'll reuse that material, we'll grind it up, we'll leave it on the site, and we'll put it right back down underneath the new asphalt as a new subgrade material. So we do these things not only because they're sustainable, but also because they're economically feasible. There is a lot of scrap value in the building. We are removing mostly the electrical conduit and the feeders. That copper is highly valuable. So a lot of the value that you get out of that will be seen in the bid results. So your demolition contractor is going to take into account, he thinks he's going to be able to scrap so much copper, he thinks he's going to be able to scrap so much steel, and that'll come off of the value of that bid to demolish the building.
Okay. So back to the first questions about the performance indicators, that I understand there are probably, I could think of right now, 6 or 7 different types of certifications in the industry leading towards building. LEED is one of them, BREEAM's another one, WELL's another one. So that's the holistic, but I'm asking more for the meat. What are the performance indicators that you have targeted for this building? Whether it's LEED or whether it's BREEAM or whether, whatever it is, what are the targets? And, because you sort of need to know that before you go in. And so I'm just asking, what are those?
So, for example, when we started out on the project, on the mechanical systems, on those areas alone, AEC, our engineer, came in and did a competitive or a comparison of each system that we could utilize on the building. We looked at efficiency, we looked at cost, and made a decision that the systems that we currently have designed for the building, sticking with rooftop units as they are today, but going to highly efficient, that the building code today actually is far and beyond what, it matches up with LEED almost. It's not too difficult to take a building like what we have and get the LEED silver, simply by, I'm going to kind of maybe dumb this down a little bit, but simply by adding bike racks or doing some very minor, adding showers, those things. So the building code really pushes us in that direction to start with. And it really is just taking on those things that make the most sense. So we could have left the lighting in as it is and reused some of that fluorescent lighting, but it makes more sense because, to put LED lighting throughout the entire building. So to say we have specific indicators as to what we were trying to achieve, that's a difficult thing for us to answer because we're just, it's where the opportunity was is what we went after. So it was in the HVAC systems, it was in the lighting, it was, in the materialism of the building and where that made sense. And if we were looking for indicators, I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that if we were going to do LEED Silver, we're not that far off of it. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit better.
Yeah, sort of. But it helps me understand sort of where you are. It sounds, and maybe this is not a fair summary, so you're going to have to tell me, but are you saying that once you bid, once you start, you have some general ideas about what you want to do, but once you get down into construction, maybe you know better? So let's start with a simple one. Power. A building of this size, the current state, I have no clue, but I'm using just metrics, general thumb metrics. It's probably somewhere on the order of 20 kilowatt hours or 25, right? And what is the building when you complete it? What's its power utilization? And how are you going to achieve, it sounds like you're going to lower, so what is that target and how are you going to get there?
Yeah, I think a lot of that we're going to bid the project, we're going to build it, and for lack of better words, figure that out once we sort of start to get into it. When our charge when we started the project was not to, sustainability was not an overachieving requirement. So it was really, it's a little bit of a different approach than what you're talking about. It was, where can we make the best opportunities? And those really laid in the things that we've been discussing tonight. So, bringing something like bioswales into the picture, putting solar panels. We don't have enough solar energy on the project to really, power up the whole building by no means. And is it going to offset everything? Probably not, obviously. So, but it will help. It contributes. And that's really been the approach. So to have specific targets, that's a difficult answer for our team to answer.
I would say there are like certain material and performance requirements on certain things. Like I'll use the glazing that's in the curtain wall
Yeah.
system. You saw a lot of glazing in the imagery tonight. We have very specific expectations, sustainable expectations of how that glass is going to perform. When you're putting in that much glass, we need to really study what we're asking that glass to do, so you're not getting a lot of that heat or cold through that system. So we have a really nice insulated glass system specified, and that is the minimum that all of the products, when we go out and we start bringing them in, will be vetted against. And I think that is pretty comprehensive for all of the materials that we've specified, all of the systems that we're putting in. We do state the minimum of what those need to achieve in terms of whatever their performance metrics are for that specific item into it. Things like trying to become more efficient with the power requirements of the building, that is, our electrical engineer would tell you that is a little bit harder for us to measure against right now, because this is not an existing building that we are trying to like bring back or become more efficient with its power. So we need to see how it operates once it's already established. But again, we have occupancy sensors on the lights, a lot of the equipment that is going in. We have things on window shades where they need to go. We've really tried to be very thoughtful about the systems that are going in with respect to power and energy usage from that and the consumption of that.
Okay, so it sounds like you have some broad ideas of where you're going to go, and then you're going to see what you can get out of it. Is that a fair summary? Okay.
From an energy consumption perspective, if that's...
Yeah, that's just one,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
I
if you look at
understand.
energy consumption, yes. But as Katie mentioned, we have certain areas where there are specific targets. And I do think it lies mostly in materialism.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so, Mr. Chair, there's a totally different question. Is that okay?
I think the floor is yours, Mr. Renner.
So another thing, so I hope I didn't catch you totally off guard, because I did ask a year ago for performance indicators and to have those discussions. So thank you. The next subject is about how is this contract going to be bid and administered when it comes to DBEs, MBEs, and all that kind of stuff, which is another thing that I asked more than a year ago, understanding how that works. And can you help me understand?
Yeah, sure. So we track our minority participation on all of our projects across the board. We're actually running a report out of our system today, and we found 1,015 references to diverse contractors, whether it's Edge, WB, MBE, DBE, anything like that. We've issued over $100 million of contracts, direct subcontracts, and purchase orders to diverse subcontractors in the past 5 years. So we're actively pursuing that on all projects, regardless of the target. On this particular job, there wasn't necessarily a target. We committed, I think, to trying to achieve 15% for the project. So we're actively looking for bidders who are going to be interested in the project. And one of the things that starts with is very early on. So we've been budgeting the project for about 8 months. So we're actively looking at local Gahanna-based contractors. Can you help us budget? Diverse contractors that are qualified to do the work. Can you help us budget? Because once you get them to start budgeting the project, they're invested in it. And they want to be a part of that project. So that's really where you increase the motivation from them. As we bid, we will be putting in, hey, it's strongly encouraged that you include diverse participation in your bid. I don't think we've gotten to the point where we've discussed which acronyms we're going to be tracking, right? There's a bunch out there. There's SEV, SBE, MBE, WBE, EDGE, EDGE. There's about 15 different types. We haven't discussed exactly which ones that they want to look at here, but once we do that, then we can narrow down who we're going to use and really try to maximize that opportunity. Now, sometimes you get into a situation where it's not always a low bid, right? You have 3 contractors that bid the project, and you have a diverse one that's not the low bid. And we'd like to have an open dialogue about that. Is it, do we want to go with the higher number here, or not? And sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is yes. It just depends on who that is, right? So for bidding standpoint, we will be going out. We use electronic bidding. It's not publicly advertised. Our award and selections, the CMR was publicly advertised. The bidding is private. It goes through our system. It is open book. We will make recommendations, the best value of all subcontractors to Kevin and the team. It's open book. We share all the bids, all the bid tabulations. So you can go on, you can see, here's the 5 bidders that went after the drywall package, for instance, and they went with a low bid. Or maybe they didn't go with a low bid, and what was the reason why they didn't go with a low bid. All that information will be open and transparent.
So the bidding documents themselves will discuss that you're interested in these, right? But there's no percentages or anything like that, right? Is that what you're saying?
It will discuss that, yes, we are trying to drive diverse participation. We don't intend to make it a mandate as, to say, hey, you must include 20% in your bid. Again, we feel that organically we can get to a level that's very nice. I mean, our most recent results are in between the 18 to 20% range for projects that we just started, and that's without forcing that requirement into the bid documents. It's just encouraging it, understanding who are the subs out there, and then we understand that you have a insulator that's diverse. Did you get a number from them? Okay, you did. Well, can we move forward with that? Or you have a whatever have you subcontractor that we know those partnerships that we can pair them up with to try to increase that and drive that participation. We will track it with our GMPs. Probably with the final one, we'll tell you where we are. We'll say, hey, here's currently where we are overall and the cost of work. And then in our accounting system, it'll be set up. It'll track. Everybody will report how much participation they've actually had on the project on a monthly basis.
So is the first step sort of more like an RFP and not an invitation to bid type of thing? You're asking for pricing?
No, it's a competitive bid. Yeah, but there is.
So it is an ITB more?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a lot of documentation, though. There's about 1,000 pages that go out that includes, contracts and safety plans and along with all of the documentation that they're producing.
I don't know if you guys know this, but my day job, I run the county sanitary engineering department, a $20 million operation. So doing ITBs and RFPs and all that kind of stuff,
And just
I
as
get.
as a point of reference, the design team, AEC, is a EDGE certified company, so you already have diversity spent
Good.
just on design fees.
Right.
So what's happening is even though the requirements are out there, I think both, I'll speak for your organization too, I think both our organizations, recognize the importance of diversity on projects and helping out, in bringing those types of businesses in. So it's almost automatic to us, even when there aren't requirements that we necessarily have to meet. So,
Mr. Chair, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. Any further discussion from my colleagues? I do have a quick question for you, Director Schultz. Could you speak to the logic behind breaking the contract into two parts, please?
Sure. Brant, go ahead.
I can take that. So this is pretty common in today's market. So we have multiple GMPs or contract 1 and 2, as however you want to define it, but it's for procurement. Right now, we're looking at some of the new mechanical systems, specifically electrical. It's going to take 12 months to 16 months to get. And so those impacts started with COVID, and unfortunately the supply chain has sort of relaxed everywhere except for in certain areas, and that's because of the data centers. You hear the news, the data centers going up everywhere. Well, it's continuing to put pressure on electrical equipment. Those lead times keep increasing. So in that first package, what we're looking at direct purchasing those pieces of equipment well in advance, so that we can have it on time to turn the power on when we need to fire up the HVAC equipment, so that when you guys start moving into the building, we're not coming back in 6 months later and tearing out your electrical service. So that's the reason why we're procuring certain things earlier than later. And also, it allows the design to be phased a little bit, so we tell them, hey, this is what we need to do to advance the critical path of the project, so they can break up their design and they can finish that portion of the design earlier and then finish the other stuff that we don't need later on in the project. That design can be finished later.
And just to add, go ahead, Keith.
Bid package 1 is primarily core and shell. So what that allows to happen is demolition, foundation work, site utilities, while we're finishing up the interior portions of the building and design. So instead of waiting for us to get 100% done with our drawings, it allows construction to start sooner than later. And we want to do that because that allows us to get you all in the building sooner than later too.
And the other part that I would just add to that is on our side, the administration side, what we've talked about is also, when we talk next week, we'll talk in greater detail about it, but actually going out for 2 bond issuances. This way we can ask to bond up to the cost of the project, which will be better known when we split it into 2 contracts as opposed to waiting. Schedule drives, like he just said his last point there, schedule does drive this to a certain degree. It allows us to advance things, it allows us to order things and get things in the pipeline for the project so that we shrink that construction window, and then ultimately shrink the overall cost of the project, because it definitely takes more money to do something in 24 months than 18 months or even 36 months. So there is also a practical reason on the bonding side, which we will get into more detail next committee meeting.
Thank you for that, and I believe President Bowers had a comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for all your hard work and the rest of the administrative team, and thank you to the MSA team and Alford team for working on this. The the drawings, the renderings are beautiful. I think that you have done a great job at looking at some elements within Gahanna and then pulling those into this, into the aesthetic that we're seeing today. I'm looking forward to the design conversation related to council space. So I'm really looking forward to that presentation because it seems like there's been a lot of work that's been done since we last talked last year. So thank you all for that hard work. I wanted to just piggyback a little bit on Mr. Renner's comments. Sustainability, and Ms. Freeland, I very much appreciate your comment about the fact that we're buying an existing building and repurposing that in and of itself is a major nod to sustainability. So thank you for articulating that. To Mr. Hall's point, though, if we are very close to a LEED Silver certification and it doesn't disrupt the timeline too significantly or the budget too significantly, I think that would be a great indicator. You know, people understand what that means. It certainly shows the city's commitment to that type of forward-thinking sustainability progress. So it certainly would be an interest of mine, and I think my colleagues might share some of that thought. Thank you.
Any further discussion from council? Director, I think you can speak to the permission to bid.
Yeah, so I won't get into the details of the project, but we would be formally asking for a motion for permission to bid the 825 renovation and expansion project as presented. I will note, the only note that I will make is that we will only be asking for permission to bid one time, but that also would cover both contracts, Contract 1 and Contract 2.
Any discussion on that? All right, since it's a motion, consent agenda for next week, okay, for that?
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, folks.
Appreciate it, thank you. Next up, items from the Department of Engineering, please. Good evening, Director.
Good evening and a belated Happy New Year to each of you.
Happy New Year.
I have 5 items before you this evening. The first item is the city recently received bids for water tower rehab work. We received 2 bids with D and 6 Sons being the lowest and most responsive bidder on the project. They were slightly under the engineer's estimate that was just slightly over $1 million. We do have a little over 1.25 million already appropriated for this work. The scope and breadth of this work includes cleaning and coating of the interior, exterior, as well as some miscellaneous repairs to hatches, ladders, rails, roof vents, and/or replacements, all in accordance with EPA Clean Water Act and appropriate standards, AWWA, and so forth. So, award of the contract to D and 6 Sons.
All right, thank you. Discussion from council.
I have one little thing.
Yes, Mr. Renner.
It's always exciting when you paint your elevated tank. All kidding aside, it really is a great thing because it's an asset and it's something that's very visible, and when it's painted, it looks so really nice. But have you thought about, because one thing that we did is we hired Matt McGregor, who had a drone business, and we took before and after. We had him circle and do elevated and everything before and after. It is worth every penny.
So
to
we
do
we have that covered in-house. So we do that on.
We have a drone?
Correct.
Very cool.
So Joe has his pilot's license and does the aerial photos for before and afters of a great deal of our projects. So the Taylor Station Claycraft project, as that's coming forward, he's covered that, as well as our street programs as well.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. Any further discussion? Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
I just have a question. Do you have to empty the whole tank to paint and clean inside?
There will be a drawdown of the tank and then refill.
So is there redundancy? I mean, the people that get the water from the tower, is there?
So we'll get that through Columbus and the master meters to back feed and support the
Okay.
tower as it's down.
Okay. Is there a certain color that's going to be, same color?
One that does not have to be repeatedly painted over and over again.
All right. First and then consent, okay with this one, folks? Sure. All right, thank you. Next item, please, Director.
The next item is procedural from the standpoint of a private development property on West Johnstown Road, the Everett, as a part of their development. There's a requirement through our thoroughfare plan and the need for additional right-of-way along the West Johnstown Road corridor for future widening, as well as providing accommodations for utility providers, as well as multi-use path sidewalk facilities for future improvements. So consistent with our thoroughfare plan, the property owner is, as a part of that development, is deeding over that right-of-way as a part of the development project. So this is requesting that so that we can otherwise have that recorded down at the county recorder.
All right, thank you, Director. Any discussion? Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
Did we require that for the apartment project? Did they have to put in a sidewalk in front of the building?
So there is provisions for I believe it was a multi-use path within that, and we're working through the accommodations with the developer for that. So when the time is right, whether that's with our project or through them, we're working through that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Nothing further on that one. First and then consent, okay with that? All right, thank you. Next item, please, Director.
Yes, and the next two, if you would not mind taking those together. So it's our 2024 street program, as well as the 2024 sidewalk maintenance program. So we've gone through identifying the 2024 sidewalk maintenance program area based off of recent street scan optical data for the pavement ratings to identify the streets that were in need for either rebuilds and or mill overlay, as well as some crack seal work. So those streets are otherwise identified in a map within the report. I believe we are doing about just over 3/4 of a mile, centerline mile of roadway rebuilds. Don't ask me the streets, I can look them up. And a little over 2¼ miles of mill and overlay, and similarly that for the crack seal program. So all told, as pursuant to our sidewalk recent updates to our procedures, let's see, 1½ miles will be rebuilt to ProWAG standards on those rebuild streets to the maximum extent practical to meet the ProWAG standards. And then on the roughly it's 2¼ so roughly 4½ miles of sidewalk will be under maintenance for that had been called through the ULIP data collection that transpired last year. So capturing that information, providing notice to the residents for them the opportunity to opt out, self-perform the work, or have the work done as a part of the program. So, and my understanding is the vast majority of the folks took the opportunity to stay within the program.
All right, thank you, Director. Any discussion on those two items? Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Thank you. I apologize if you said this and I didn't understand it completely. last year, when I recall, we were talking about revamping the sidewalk maintenance program or kind of pausing and reevaluating where we were. There was discussion about making sure that we were going back over recently repaved roads and identifying those for sidewalk maintenance.
So as a part of that conversation, it's my recollection that those would be otherwise integrated in the 2025, 2026, and 2027 CIPs. So we would be looking back to 2021, 2022, and 2023, those street programs, and integrating that work into future CIPs.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
Anything else on these items? Yes, Mr. Schnitzer.
Not a ton of discussion, but Director, this seems to be coming forward a smidge earlier than normal. Is that right? Yeah. Kudos to you.
Well, and the years align too, so I mean.
Awesome. And then the rebuilds that is a full removal of the street all the way down to the gravel base.
Correct. New curb, gutter, driveway aprons, sidewalk.
Right.
Correct.
And is that where there's been in the past some extension of golf carts for certain households?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just to anyone that might be viewing at home, just if your street is listed as red, just know that that's a bit more disruptive than the mill and overlay. Necessary, but nonetheless more disruptive.
To that end, Director, can you speak a little bit as to any communication and outreach efforts that will be made to those affected residents?
So we are working on that communication plan to get that information out to the residents well in advance, as well as providing, looking to set up a town hall. We don't have a date specified, to provide an open house and give an indication as to here are the standard things that you'd otherwise expect during the course of a rebuild project.
All right, thank you very much, Director. Anything else for those two items? All right, on for consent next week? All right. Thank you. Next item, please, Director.
The last item is in partnership with the Ohio Department of Transportation. They have scheduled reconstruction of the I-270 bridge along Hamilton Road. So we're a participant in those improvements. We brought forward preliminary legislation before council, I believe it was in August of last year. They are ready to bid the project coming up here, and they need our final legislation approved by, I believe, February 2nd, so that they can proceed on schedule with bidding the project. As a part of that, that provides the allocation, the engineer's estimate of probable cost associated with items for the city of Gahanna. There's some enabling work for the Big Walnut Trail extension, which would have a multi-use facility along the western side of the bridge. They're accommodating that within the construct of the new bridge, as well as decorative railing and lighting part of the project. So that engineer's estimate at this point in time is just under $750,000, but the city would otherwise be accountable and responsible for any overage at the time of bid.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion?
I'm so excited this is happening.
Yes.
That's my only comment.
That bridge needs a lot of work.
So
Very
bad.
exciting to see this happening. The emergency and waiver, certainly at the request of the state, and their timeline here is not an issue for me. That said, on for consent next week. Work for folks?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of discussion items here under item D, Public Arts Policy Status Update and Discussion. Defer to the mayor and the administration on this one. It's my understanding that your panel did submit a report to you in mid-December.
Well, you could just give the report.
No, no,
Absolutely.
I'm just-
That's my report. They submitted a draft to me shortly before Christmas. Currently working on formalizing a policy with our outside counsel, and I will provide updates as soon as they are available.
Okay. All right. Anything else on that item? Yes, Ms. Padova.
Is there a timeline as to when that
ASAP.
will be? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Discussion item number 2, committee schedule for 2024. President Bowers.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard in the middle of typing your notes.
Taking notes, okay. As you might have noticed, at the organizational meeting last week, we set a committee schedule just for Q1 of this year. We wanted to have a conversation with the administration to scale back a couple of committee meetings, particularly over holidays and in the summer. We are one of few municipalities that meets 4 times a month every month. So it was in order to give staff and council members an opportunity for a little bit of time off, particularly over the summer. We had a great meeting with the administration, senior directors, and Mayor Jadwin just before we met today. For the week of Memorial Day week, May 27th, we will not hold a committee meeting that week. And then in July, we will not hold committee meetings on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of July. We don't anticipate that this will cause any disruption to legislation. What we expect to do would be to stack a committee meeting at the July 15th meeting. And so we intend to present a council rule update that would accommodate that change. I think the administration was pleased with the suggestion, and I think that it'll give everybody a little bit of breathing room. It's not too dissimilar from what we did during COVID. Mayor Jadwin reminded me that we held committee meetings immediately following council meetings, so we were meeting 2 times a month over Microsoft Teams back then. So with plenty of lead time to the staff, we don't anticipate that it will cause a disruption to legislation or force any additional emergency and waivers to come forward. So, open to questions or discussion?
Anything from my colleagues? All right, thank you, President Bowers. Thank you for your efforts on that. Next up, a discussion on our resolutions calendar. Mr. Clerk, turn things over to you on that one.
Actually turn it back to council. So I did distribute on the agenda, just kind of a historical snapshot, the last 3 years, what council has passed in terms of those commemorative honorary type resolutions, along with those proclamations that the mayor had delivered during council meetings, just to give you an idea on those resolutions that were commemorating a month or a week. That had a special significance for the city. So just wanted some input going forward in the year, what members might be interested in presenting.
Any discussion from my colleagues?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Ms.
did.
Jones.
Yeah, I would recommend a couple of additions. So we might want to consider a resolution in November for Veterans Day and Military Family Month for November. And then there are a couple of opportunities, but considering the indigenous roots of Gahanna, maybe a resolution to recognize either Indigenous Peoples Day, or I believe November is Native American Heritage Month as well. So something for consideration.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jones. I had hoped also to include Native American Heritage Month in November, and then bring back the Honoring First Responders Day in October as well. So in addition to many that are listed that we did last year.
Thank you, President Bowers. Madam Mayor?
Sure, thank you. So I appreciate the list. The list, to Mr. Van Meter's point, are proclamations I presented in council chambers. This does not include proclamations I presented outside. So some of the ones that have been mentioned are ones that I have been doing. So I don't know if we talk about procolutions. I have cut back a lot on the ones I present in council chambers because of duplicity. The more the council has done resolutions here, I found other outlets to do that, so we're not belaboring the point here in chambers. But if there's an opportunity, again, to work together, I would love to have that conversation and see what we can do.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate those comments. And for me, I think as much as we can work collaboratively and work together without duplicating efforts, I think that makes sense to me. Maybe be trendsetters and procolutions will catch on throughout the region.
We should trademark that name,
Yeah.
yes.
Any other discussion on that item? Okay, thank you all for that. We're nearly there, folks. Next up, number 4, council rules of procedure. Madam President? Do you have things to ask you?
Sure, and I may pass the baton over to Mr. Van Meter, too. As I mentioned last year, the end of last year, we have some revisions to council rules. One of those I just mentioned being the committee schedule as well. And I think Mr. Van Meter has identified other potential amendments to council rules of procedure. My thinking was that we could have sort of an informal working group, work directly with Mr. Van Meter out of meeting time in order to put together some proposed amendments to the existing council rules. I thought, Mrs. McGregor, with your historical experience, if you would be willing to serve and support that, I think that you would be a great addition to work with Mr. Van Meter and perhaps Ms. Jones and Ms. Padova. We can have up to 3 council members working on this project without implicating a public meeting. So if the 3 of you would be interested and willing in supporting those amendments and then bringing them forward to council, I'd be greatly appreciative if your capacity allows. And you can answer later if you don't want to answer now. Okay. Do you have anything else, Mr. Van Meter, on this topic?
Nothing further, but that sounds great. I will circle back with the council members to kind of line up some times that we can have a discussion on those. Thank you.
And just to clarify, that's not to exclude anyone else. So if Mr. Renner, Mr. Schnetzer, or anybody else wants to help support that or participate, and you have ideas, please forward them to Mr. Van Meter. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers, and thank you, Mr. Clerk. Appreciate that. All right, final item here, resolution recognizing Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Mr. Clerk, turn this over to you.
So I had put together the resolution that council had considered last year. I did do just a couple minor updates to recognize the correct day and year, but definitely welcome any feedback that council members might have on any language adjustment.
Any discussion on this item? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Clerk, for your efforts on that. Consent agenda for that next week work for folks? All right. Anything further for the committee of the whole this evening? All right. Seeing nothing further, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.